You know, I swore at one time I would never wear a wire. Now I have one on just about every week. It's unbelievable how things change in my life. Anyway, I know you've all had a great day. This is the end of the day. You've heard all about personal growth and business growth, and now you get to hear from a former mobster, right? When Bedros does something, he really goes all out and does it all the way. But really is, hey, amen. And Bedros and I had the pleasure of meeting, I would say about 2 months ago. He was on my podcast. Great guy. He asked me to do this, and I said, absolutely. So it's a pleasure to be here. A few of the people that I met, I know already. I don't know how many ever know who I am. Anybody? I can't see anybody. All right, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, you know, I got 20 minutes to tell you a little bit about personal growth and about business, something that I would say I have enough experience in, and that I've been able to kind of reinvent myself a couple of times in my life. And as far as business is concerned, people, I've had my ups, I have my downs, I had my successes, and so far at this point in time, I'm 74 years old, and praise God, I'm doing okay. So things have gone right in my life. Thank you. But let me tell you how it all started. You saw the video back here. My dad, Sonny Franzese, was the underboss of the Colombo family, one of the 5 New York Mafia, Cosa Nostra families. By the way, there really is no Mafia here in America. In America, it's called Cosa Nostra, means this thing of ours. Similar to the organization in Italy, but different in some ways. If you're a made man, if you actually took the oath in Italy to become a member, you're not actually made here in America, and vice versa. When people from the Mafia would come here, we were respectful to them, obviously, but we didn't share our personal secrets with them. 2 different organizations. And my dad was the underboss, very, very high position in that life. You have a boss, an underboss, a capo regime or captain, and a soldier. I'm sure many of you have seen The Godfather. There is a position called consigliere. Robert Duvall played that role, played it brilliantly, I might add, but in The Godfather it was fictional, because in order to be a sworn, made member of that life and take the oath, your father must be Italian, and you do take an oath. And my dad, as far as you know, he was one of the most high-profile guys of his time, for sure. He was kind of like the John Gotti of his day. And originally, my dad didn't want me involved in this life. He wanted me to go to school, be a doctor. And I was on that way until my dad got in some very serious trouble. He was always under investigation, always going to trial. I grew up in that whole atmosphere. Grew up, as a matter of fact, hating the police. I saw them as the enemy. My dad was my hero in life, so I always saw them as the bad guys. So I was going to school, going to be a doctor. My dad then gets convicted in federal court and gets a 50-year prison sentence. He was convicted of masterminding a nationwide string of bank robberies. I'm a pre-med student at Hofstra University when my dad goes into prison. I'm 18, 19 years old. Joe Colombo, who was the boss of my family, he kind of took me under his wing, started to meet a lot of my dad's friends. Mike, what are you doing going to school? If you don't get on the street and help your father, he's going to die in prison. And people, I want to tell you this. I did almost 10 years in prison for a crime that I was guilty of. I pled guilty, did my time. My dad did a lot of bad things in his life, no doubt. But that particular crime that he did almost 40 years in prison for, 40 on that 50, my dad was innocent of. He was no bank robber. I'll take that to my grave. Investigated that case thoroughly, spoke to every witness that testified against him. They recanted their testimony. We gave him lie detector tests. We could never get his conviction overturned. My dad did 40 years, was released from prison in 2017 at the age of 100. He was the oldest inmate in the federal system at the time of his release. And unfortunately, my dad passed away during a pandemic, during COVID, in 2020 at the age of 103. He was the oldest living made man in America for sure, quite possibly in the world. I don't think anybody lived to that age. That's not a lifestyle that's conducive to living that old. So my dad's kind of a legend. And anyway, you know, during that time, I went to see my dad in prison in Leavenworth. And I said, bank robbery. Dad, that doesn't sound like you. He said to me, son, I'm innocent. We got to prove my innocence. So what happens? I start to meet a lot of his friends. I lose interest in school. Dad, I got to help you out. You're going to die in here. We were in a meeting in Leavenworth Penitentiary. He was kind of arguing with me. He didn't want that for me, but he said, okay, son, but if you're going to be on the street, I want you on the street the right way. In his mind, the right way was to become a member of his life, and at that point in time, he proposed me for membership into the Colombo family. You can't just go up to somebody and say, hey, I'd like to join, what do I have to do? Somebody has to propose you and vouch for you. In my case, it was my dad, and in that life, there is a lot of nepotism. A lot of fathers bring in their sons, their relatives. For security reasons, you try to keep things tight, keep it in the family. So, I took an oath to become a MAID member. I won't get into all the details. We don't have that much time. I took an oath in 1975 on Halloween night with 5 other gentlemen. Very serious ceremony, dimly lit room late at night. The 6 of us walked into a room individually. The boss was seated at the head of like a horseshoe configuration. Underboss, consigliere to his left and right, and all the captains were alongside of them. I walked down the aisle, stood in front of the boss, held out my hand, took a knife right here. Cut my finger, some blood dropped on the floor. This is a blood oath. I cupped my hands. He took a picture of a saint, Catholic altar card, put it in my hands, lit it aflame. It didn't hurt, it burned quickly. And he said, tonight, Michael Franzese, you are born again into a new life, into Cosa Nostra. Violate what you know about this life, betray your brothers, and you will die and burn in hell like the saint is burning in your hands. Do you accept? Yes, I do. Kind of a reinvention of my life. Going to school, going to be a doctor. And now I'm taking an oath to be a made man, a mobster in a Colombo family. Kind of reinvent your life. And when I got into that life, I saw something right away. There's kind of 2 people in that life, 2 different divisions. You got the gangsters and you got the racketeers. Gangsters, they were kind of guys that we just kind of hanging around, grinding out a living, waiting for somebody to tell them what to do, doing some of the grunt work, doing some heavy work at times. They weren't earning any money. And then you had the racketeers. And you saw that these guys knew how to do both. They were the earners in the family, and that's what I wanted to be. I was fortunate. I had a little bit of an entrepreneurial way about me. When I was a kid even, I could never stand not having money in my pocket. I always wanted to have money in my pocket, so I was always doing things to earn. So when I got into that life, I knew what I had to do. In the Colombo family, we had 115 made guys that actually took the oath. We had a lot of associates, but 115 guys that actually took the oath. Out of that 115, 20 of us were earning money. The rest of the guys who had a no-show job, who was trying to get by, grinding out a living, that was it. And we had a little more authority, a little more respect, because no organization works without money. I don't care what it is, legit, illegit, you gotta have money. And so we were feeding the family with money. As a result, I rose in the ranks in 1980, the boss of my family, Carmine Persico, who was actually indicted on the Mafia commission case by Rudy Giuliani, given 100 years, and he died in prison in 2019. He came to me, he says, Mike, you're doing a good job for the family. I'm gonna make you a capo regime, a captain. And that's it, and that's a very powerful position. I had a lot of men assigned under me, and I did my thing. During that time, I was an earner. The biggest thing I did, I devised a scheme along with another person to defraud the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. I ran that operation for about 8 years. I had all the Russians from Brighton Beach as my partners. At the height of my operation, we were selling 500 million gallons of gas a month, taking down 30, 40 cents a gallon, whatever the market would bear. We were pulling down $7, $8, $9, $10 million a week. Ran that for about 8 years. That's the crime that I eventually went to prison for, big racketeering case. And I eventually pled guilty on that. 10-year prison sentence, $15 million restitution. I had $5 million in forfeitures. I had a jet plane at the time, a helicopter, houses in different parts of the country, gave it all to the government, and went off and did my time. There's a whole reason behind that, but I can't get into all of that now because we don't have the time. So I do 8 years in prison, and I realized I became a major target of law enforcement. As I stand here before you, I was indicted 7 times. I had 2 federal racketeering cases, one brought on by Rudy Giuliani. I had a state racketeering case in Florida, and then the racketeering case that I pled guilty on. I went to trial 5 times. In each case, I was either acquitted at trial or the case was dismissed. They were never able to get me that way. The reason I was only able to get 10 years when people were getting 100 was because I had leverage with the government. When I went into a negotiation with them to try to get better time, I had leverage because they really wanted to convict me. They had a hard time doing it, so I used that as leverage. They never figured that I was going to walk away from that life. They figured they'd pin this one on me. I'd come out, be back in the life, and then they'd get me the next time. But I kind of fooled them. I had made a plan to walk away from that life because I knew that the life was in serious trouble. Everybody I knew, people, everybody is either dead or in prison for the rest of their lives. The 5 guys that I walked into a room with that night and took an oath, not one of them are alive today. All 5 of them were murdered. We had a big war in our family, and 13 men were killed. 18 men became informants. 63 men went to jail. Tough life at times, and I was able to survive that. How did I reinvent myself again? Why did I get out of the life? Well, honestly, without getting into great detail, I met a young woman who I fell very much in love with. I was producing movies at the time. Smokey Robinson had brought me a script. He was a friend for a breakdance movie back in 1985. We filmed it in Florida. I brought in 20 dancers and a cast and crew from LA to work in the film, and I saw one of these dancers getting out of a pool in southern Florida. It was like a Pepsi commercial. Everything went in slow motion for me. I saw her, that was it. Well, today, she's my wife of 40 years. And yes, thank you. And people, one of the horrors of that life is that I don't know, it's a bad life. It's an evil life. Now, I don't call the guys evil. I was one of them. You know, there's the age-old question, why do good people do bad things? Sometimes you feel justified. We took an oath. We all knew what the consequences were. If we broke the oath, doesn't make it right. It's just the way we justify things. But the life is a bad lifestyle. Why? Because I don't know any family of any member of that life that hasn't been totally devastated, including my own. Now, not my wife and kids. I've been able to spare them of that. But my mother, 33 years without her husband. When she passed away in 2012, I can only describe her life with my dad as being ugly, because she blamed him for everything that went wrong in her life. Rightfully so. What went wrong? My baby sister, 27 years old, dies of an overdose of drugs. My brother, 25 years a drug addict. I can't even begin to tell you what I had to do just to keep him alive on the street. My other sister, 40 years old, never mentally stable. She died at the age of 40. The whole family destroyed. And every family of every member of that life in some way undergoes the same fate. So any lifestyle that does that to a family, very bad. And I speak to a lot of gangbangers. I go to prisons all the time. I go to a lot of youth environments, and I tell them straight out, you don't get away with criminal conduct anymore in this country if you're a member of any gang or anything else. You got to stay away from that life. There's no way to beat them. Just can't do it. You can get on the street here in California and rob up to $1,000 and nothing happens. But if you're part of a gang, you're in trouble. You got to stay away from it. So I realized I had to get away from that life if I wanted this woman in my life, because I was a major target. So I devised a plan to try to get away from the life. And people, I never put anybody in prison. I didn't go into any witness protection programs. That wasn't my thing. I wasn't looking to hurt anybody. I just had a plan to get out of the life. I did 8 years in prison. I actually did 5. I was paroled. And while I was on parole, it was very bad for me because it became very public that I was walking away from that life. You can't do that. Walk away from that life, you're in trouble. Contract on my life. My father practically disowned me. He didn't know what was going on. Everybody thought I was going to become a major witness. That's not what I was doing. The government really hurt me in many ways. They were trying to tell people that I was going to become an informant and a snitch. It wasn't happening. They kept me in lockdown. I had a lot of trouble. I'm out on parole here in California for 13 months. Worst time of my life. Really bad. I was basically dodging bullets. My family and I had to move. It was a very, very tough time. After 13 months, I don't mind admitting it, like a fool, I fall into a trap, violate my parole. I'm coming out of a bank in Southern California, and 15 agents slapped the cuffs on me, throw me into the paddy wagon, leaned on my bank accounts, took my car away, went into my house with a search warrant, took every penny that we had, took every dollar out of my wife's purse. We had 2 babies at the time. They said, this isn't your money, it's your husband's money, you don't work. We took everything that he's got. We're indicting him on a new case. We violated his parole. You'll never see your husband a free man again. That was it. Almost lost her that time. She was totally destroyed. You know, after doing 5 years, 13 months, 2 little kids, she figured her life was over. That was it. She was 27 years old. It was done. I'm in there. First night they put me in lockdown, people. I'm not going to get into all of it. It's a little bit dramatic, but it was the worst night of my life. And I can only tell you this. It was during 3 years. I spent 29 months and 7 days in solitary confinement. 6x8 cell, 24/7. That's not easy. I saw a lot of guys that not do well during that time. Isolation like that is a form of torture. I'm dead set against it for young people. It can destroy them emotionally. And I've spoken to the Senate and everybody else about prison reform with our young people. Can't have that. There's got to be a different way. You're in jail already. You don't have to punish them more by putting them in isolation. It's tough. But anyway, I got through it. I'm going to be honest with you. I became a person of faith. I'm a strong Christian at this point. I speak at churches all the time, share my testimony. But my life changed during that time. Amen. Changed during that time because I had hit bottom. And you know, when you hit bottom, there's only one way up or down. You know, that's it. And for me, it was really getting into my Bible, really understanding my faith. I'm speaking tomorrow at Harvest Christian Church. My pastor there, Greg Laurie, who had a tremendous influence on me. I speak at churches all over the world. But anyway, the second time I reinvented myself, I had done that time in the hole, and every day when I was in solitary, I would write the warden, "Warden, let me out of here. I'm in Lompoc, California. There's no wise guys over here. I'm not afraid to be out on the yard. Put me out on the yard." I had a yellow pad and a paper. I wrote them every single day for 29 months and 7 days. I was very effective. It took them that long to answer me. The CO comes down to get me. He says, "Hey, Franzese, the warden wants to see you." I said, "Great." I never met him. They don't come down there, right? So I get ready. I go up. I'll never forget. As I approach the office, he looks at me, and he walks over to his file cabinet, and he opens it up, and there's all my letters. He was obligated to keep them by the Bureau of Prisons, right? So he says, "Franzese, you're wearing me out with these letters every single day." I said, "Hey, Warden, I got a lot of time on my hands. I figure I'll write you, right? What else am I going to do?" He says, "You know what?" He said, "Just for your persistence, I'm going to let you out on the yard. You got 6 months to go. That case they were trying to put against you fell apart. You got 6 months to go. If you thought you were going to get hurt out there, you wouldn't ask to go out." I said, "Thank you." He said, "You're not going to escape. You got 6 months to go." I said, "Warden, come on, don't insult me with escapes." I said, "Look at me. I lost 15 pounds. I got a young, pretty wife. Let me go in and walk the track and get in the weight room and get myself in shape." So he says, "Okay, but you have to sign a waiver. Anything happens to you on the yard, you're not going to hold the Bureau of Prisons responsible." I said, "Give me anything, I'll sign it," right? So I get out. It's a beautiful day in Lompoc, California. I got a Sony Walkman on. Any young people here, they don't know what that is in this digital world. Anyhow, you hear music out of it, right? So I'm walking around. I'm listening to Billy Joel. I felt like I was free. It was terrific, right? I get about halfway into the first lap, and I hear over the loudspeaker, "Franzese, report back to the warden's office." That's bad news. I figure I was what you call a central monitoring inmate. Any movement on my part had to be approved by Bureau of Prisons in Washington. I figured he got word they're going to lock me down again. So I'm preparing my speech. I get there. It gets worse. I see two guys in suits by his door. I don't have to see a badge. I see the suit and the shoes. I knew who they were, FBI, right? I turn around, I say, "Hey guys, leave me alone. You know I'm not cooperating. I got 6 months to go. I'll finish it up in a hole, get out, leave me alone." They said, "No, Franzese, get back here. We need to talk to you." I said, "No talk." They said, "Get back here. This is important." And I thought maybe something was up with my family, right? So I go in, I said, "What do you guys want?" They said, "Well, we're going to ask you a question." I said, "What's that?" They said, "How long have you been down?" I said, "I've been down 8 years. You guys know that. You put me here. What do you want?" They said, "We need a favor from you." I said, "No favors. There's always strings attached with you guys. No favors. They said, "Leave me alone." They said, "Just listen." They said, "You've been down 8 years. We need a favor from you." They said, "Listen up." I said, "What?" Major League Baseball, the NBA, NFL, NHL are getting together to do an anti-gambling video. I had a big gambling operation on the street. I had 12 or 13 bookmakers working for me. We had a lot of athletes gambling with us, right? They said, "You claimed you turned your life around. We're going to give you an opportunity to prove it. We're putting together a video." Major League Baseball, the NBA, they're heading this up. They're putting together a video. "We want you to come and tell these kids and these pro athletes exactly how you set them up." I said, "Guys, you've been telling me for 8 years I'm going to get killed. Now you want me to do a video?" I said, "This is a setup." I said, "I don't get this." They said, "No, it's legit." I said, "I don't do videos. I got to get out here and straighten out my life." They said, "Listen, if you agree to do this, we're going to sweeten the pot for you." I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "We're taking you out of here for 3 days. We're filming this in Chicago. We got a hotel room all set for you, king-size bed, pillows. Go down, take a dip in a pool, order room service, pasta, macaroni, whatever you Italians eat. Have a ball." They said, "Who's better than you for 3 days?" I said, "Guys, I've been down 8 years. You get my wife in that room with me, I'll make a video on anything that you want." And trust me, I meant it, right? 8 years is a long time. Anyway, they said, we'll try. As it turned out, just my luck, we had an earthquake that Monday here in California. They couldn't take me out, but since I agreed to do it, NBA Productions came into the prison, and I filmed my portion of the video inside the prison, and I told them exactly how we set these athletes up. I get out. 6 months later, the leagues approach me directly. Franzese, this is really having an impact on our players. Come and speak to our players. I said, guys, I don't do that. I don't speak to players. I'm just out of prison. I'm trying to get my life. I don't do that. And I'll never forget, the head of security for Major League Baseball, he's this big ex-homicide detective in New York, right? He says to me, oh, big tough mob guy, you afraid to speak to a few athletes? I said, all right, set it up. I'm going, right? That was in 1996. I spoke to every Major League Baseball team in spring training, all the minor league teams. We did the same with the NBA, same with the NFL. I did it for several years. And then in 1998, the NCAA jumped on board. And since then, I've spoken to over 350 universities to all the student athletes about the dangers of gambling and the company that they keep. Amen. Thank you. At the same time, the pastor of my church, who was very good to me when I was in the hole, when I got out, he says, Mike, you got a great testimony. Will you come and give it to the church? I said, testimony? I don't even know what he was talking about. I thought you did that from a witness stand, right? But anyway, went and spoke to my church, and people, I can tell you this. Since 1996, I've spoken at over 2,000 events all across the world. I'll be in Monaco next week, Australia the week after that, and God has blessed me in many, many ways to take this message all across the world in all different forums. I speak in churches, I speak to athletes, I speak to gangbangers, I speak in boardrooms, I speak everywhere. I wrote a business book. You know, I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. Learning how to do business on the street, I was able to take that and do the same here and be successful in this environment also. I now have a pizza company. I have a Franzese wine branded in my name. We're in business a couple of years, and pretty soon we're going to be blanketing the country. So listen, I got a lot more I could say, but the clock is up on me, so that's it. I'm going to be out and talking to all of you. I got a couple of books. You want to take a picture, sign, whatever. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I have a question for all my friends and followers. Have you tried my wine yet? You know, in the last 2 years, we've made tremendous progress with Franzese wine, and it's really all thanks to your support, and obviously because people are finding out we have a great wine at a great price. In 2025, we aim to become a national brand, and I want all of you to be a part of it. Every bottle you buy, every story you share builds more than a brand. It fuels a movement. The story of our wine is one of people having second chances and of lives being transformed. That's the truth. So go to my website, franzesewine.com, and get your bottle today. Salud, my friends.